The last time Final Fantasy returned to its roots by leaning into the latter half of its namesake, we got Final Fantasy IX for the PlayStation 1. Not the most iconic installment, true, but one that in recent years has gained a beloved reputation amongst its fans for just how well it harkens back to the 1987 original. It was darn near swords and sorcery perfection. Fast forward well over 20 years later, and Square Enix has been clear in the lead up to Final Fantasy XVI's launch that this PS5 exclusive has the exact same objective. Only now, in 2023, the high fantasy rulebook has very much been rewritten. It's no longer enough to have a wizard, rogue and healer in your party and simply call it a day. Final Fantasy XVI, at least from what I played during my recent 6-hour preview session, in both its story and presentation is far grittier in a way that feels appropriate. This is clearly a medieval-esque Final Fantasy game made for the Game of Thrones generation, doing away with lofty sci-fi concepts and boy band protagonists in favour of complex family dynamics, multiple warring factions, and characters that I actually care about. I find it hard not to be totally engaged throughout, and already I can't wait to play more when the full game releases on June 22nd, 2023. At the centre of it all is Clive Rosfield, which we're immediately introduced to during a flash-forward sequence in which he does battle with an epic-looking fire dragon. And I'll say this, it's an extremely effective way to open your game. The scale and tone of this story is instantly set before we eventually get the chance to catch a breath and kick off the events of Final Fantasy XVI proper during Clive's early days as a young ward of the king and the Little Prince's chief protector. It's here where I was properly introduced to Final Fantasy XVI's location of Valisthea and got to grips with what is easily a vastly improved combat system compared to Final Fantasy XV. Throwing swords into enemies and plinths as Noctis and teleporting to them was great, don't get me wrong, but even in just my short time battling foes during this preview, I can already tell that Clive's abilities are much more diverse, offering a lot more creative attack opportunities as a result. I know certain Final Fantasy veterans are still a bit tetchy about seeing real-time combat included, but I promise that what's here represents far more than just simple slashing and dodging. Final Fantasy XVI's combat is all tied around the revitalized Econ system. Similar to, say, the different stances in Ghost of Tsushima, Devil May Cry 5, or most recently Star Wars Jedi Survivor, this is an elemental-based power mechanic that lets Clive switch between 3 different types of magic at any one time, depending on the situation. Eventually, you'll be able to transform into beast-like creatures representative of each Econ, but for now, however, just channeling them in Clive's human form ensures that the action never stays still. The Phoenix Econ, based around fire, is what I was able to wield for the majority of my preview. In addition to a handy dash-like Phoenix shift maneuver that made light work of dishing out pain to enemies up close, it allowed me to surround foes in flames using the Scarlet Cyclone attack. And not only do attacks like this look insanely attractive to perform, but activating them using the right side trigger is effortless and helps to truly shake up every battle. The Garuda Econ proved equally as effective, yet for different reasons, with its wind-based magic strikes working excellently for AoE attacks. Though only 3 Econs can ever be equipped at once, this is more than enough to keep the combat fresh and unique as Clive progresses through his story. My curiosity is certainly piqued about how the other power sets I didn't get to try will function and how they'll affect the flow of combat. Overall, getting stuck in against foes feels incredibly fluid, even if dodge being mapped to the R1 button takes a little bit of getting used to before it becomes natural to pull off. My time spent traversing Valisthea was mostly confined to what I would call linear levels, be it forests, desert canyons, and castle courtyards that mostly guide you through. However, while it might not be pitched as a quote-unquote true open world game like Final Fantasy XV, Final Fantasy XVI only gave me full confidence that trimming this fat was absolutely a good idea, because in addition to the story-driven cinematic moments will be hub-like areas. The one I was placed into after being fast-forwarded to a later part of the game was a green field-like area, with a handful of side expeditions to take on and dangerous beasts to face, the latter of which I may or may not have been too underleveled to fight. All of Final Fantasy XVI's components seemingly coalesce roughly 2 or 3 hours into the narrative at a place called Cid's Highway. It's here where you'll be able to buy gear items, craft new ones, and get a better sense of this war-torn world after Ward turned mercenary turned resistance fighter Clive is almost dragged kicking and screaming into joining the correct side. It wasn't clear to what extent Cid's hideaway will open up or undergo significant changes, or even if players will get to visit it at will in between adventures. That said, as a way to learn more about Clive's friends and a place in which to swap gear in and out that better suits your preferred econ powers, there's a lot to dig into. As a lapsed Final Fantasy fan that didn't fully jive with either Final Fantasy XV or even the most recent Final Fantasy VII Remake, this small preview slice of Final Fantasy XVI was enough for me to instantly put it on my list of 2023 must-plays. The combat feels unbelievably fluid compared to before. Clive and his nature to carry the weight of the world on his shoulders makes him incredibly easy to empathise with, and Valisthea is undeniably beautiful and dripping with lore. As well as being an affectionate way to pay tribute to the franchise's past, Final Fantasy XVI has the makings of an epic action RPG worthy of its numbered entry. Thanks again for listening to our preview of Final Fantasy XVI, guys. Do you plan on picking up the game when it releases in June? Let us know in the comment section below. And until next time, thanks again for watching.